Aquarius, welcome to your prosperity report for the period between April 1st and July 1st, 2017. It's Rena here. So what I'm going to do is my typical tarot spread, focusing specifically on career and money. Not going to do the astrology because of I think I just prefer to do it in private readings with a person's time of birth, because I want to really, hone in on it. But I am going to read a passage from The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity by Catherine Ponder. I thought her name was Catherine Ann Ponder, so I think it is, but this one says Catherine Ponder. The book actually came out in 1962, by the way. So it's a pretty old book. But so let me lay out the cards first and see what they say. So this is for a 3-month period. I'm recording this on the equinox, so it's before the month of April, obviously. Okay. So I'm getting, it's funny because before I even saw that Empress card, I'm getting a lot of cards with cups in it. We have the 4 of Cups, the 5 of Cups, the Page of Cups, and the 3 of Cups. Oh wow, they're all in order. 3, 4, 5, and then you got the Page. And then the Empress card. Now cups can relate to either things that are like a spiritual type of profession where you're using your intuition, or a feeling profession, like maybe being a social worker, which I could totally see an Aquarius person being, or psychology, things along those lines. Or it could be even a nonprofit, I think would qualify, because it's like people over profit, where you're more concerned with helping people than necessarily getting rich. Or what's the other one? Oh, creative types of professions. And so let me just before I get into that, I do want to read from the book. Just probably I started getting into the reading. You're probably like, why do you want to get into the book? Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I will set that aside just so I can continue with the continuity of the reading. So, the general theme is the 5 of Cups. This is a card of dejection, of feeling disappointed by something in your life. And as you can see, they make a point to show that 2 cups are remaining. So for some people, this can be indicative of a person with a negative thinking pattern, where they only see the negative side of the situation and they don't realize that there's a silver lining. And, this can indicate any kind of disappointment, any kind of loss, but I tend to think of it in emotional terms. Since it is cups, it's not like losing money like 5 of Pentacles or anything like that. So let's just put this out on the table. Somebody who thought they were going to get a promotion and they didn't get one. Okay? And they really put a lot of stock into that title, or that scenario. Maybe they wanted more money, or maybe they wanted more prestige or power. In the past position, we have the Empress card, and this is the card I associate with the artist. This can also relate to motherhood. So it could be a situation where perhaps, like, let's say you took your maternity leave, you go back to the job and somebody else is doing the job, and everybody at the office seems to have kind of gotten along fine without you, and you're kind of on the outside looking in. And that may feel very disappointing. But with the Empress in the past position, I feel like this disappointment maybe has to do with the fact that you're working someplace that doesn't have the kind of creative outlet for you. And maybe you gave up something that was more creative so that you could have something that makes more money. Because I did get the Hierophant. Now that's a future card, but I still feel that it could be in that ballpark of like a corporate type of environment where you are required to conform to their standards, or whatever you want to call it, their policies. I was going to say, typically Aquarians do not fit well into that type of environment, because you are just the kind of people that want to be individualists. And if you're working for a corporate type of an entity, you may feel like you're just a cog in the wheel. But actually, that could happen in any kind of a job where you are not allowed to kind of shine a light of your own, where you're forced to like follow somebody else's policies. It may feel very stifling, creatively, and also just like your own expression of independence. And so right now, if you feel like you sold out, right now you're feeling flat, you're feeling indifferent, and you see there's an offer that's being made, and you're like kind of blasé. So it could be that you thought, well, this will provide me with much more career advancement. And yet, once you got into that environment, you realized that it wasn't enough. Like that having career advancement and you hate going to work every day isn't going to actually make your life better. I was just thinking of how when I worked in a school system as a teacher's assistant, that I used to think, wow, and then you get all these holidays off, and you get this vacation. And one thing I found out was that it doesn't matter how much time you get off. If you dislike the environment you're in, it's going to, be that time to go back to work, before you know it. And it's going to, in other words, there's never enough time to have off when you hate your job. So just keep that in mind. Our lives are very short, relatively speaking, and our lives are too short to get up and be someplace for 6, 8, 10 hours a day. It's something that you hate to do. It just does not make sense. And I know people say, well, you don't understand. I have to do this and I have to do that. And yeah, sometimes there are reasons for doing certain things, and it's a sacrifice. And so if it is a sacrifice, then be happy to do the sacrifice. If you're doing it for your children, don't be resentful. It sucks when it's a sacrifice and you're resentful and you're bitter about it. So otherwise, it's like, what is the worst that could happen if you were to just quit? Well, that depends on the individual, I suppose. It's like, I guess you'll never find out if you're too afraid of the possibilities. But the higher message is the 3 of Wands. And this is kind of what I was talking about. Now, this could actually be dealing with travel. You may feel like you want to do something. Now, this could be with this particular company, that you would rather go somewhere else within the company. and see the world, because this is a card of travel. But it could be your own business, because the number 3, and the Empress is number 3. It's a number of creativity, your creative self-expression, not you expressing somebody else's vision, but you expressing your own vision. And going off to see the world and feeling that sense of adventure in life. And so it may be like, for instance, if you have your own business, or maybe that was something that you were getting off the ground. And maybe the 5 of Cups isn't that you're working for somebody else, but you're simply feeling that it's not working out, this new business of yours, and you're feeling like, oh, it's a failure. Well, the higher message is saying that maybe you're setting your sights too narrowly. Maybe you are meant to be going and expanding your territory. Maybe where you are right now isn't wide enough for you to be playing with, the energy within that area. And you have to travel. It could even be like, with the internet. Maybe you have a brick and mortar type of business, and you need to just expand on the internet and reach other countries. What crosses you? Well, you could say what crosses you is, if it's an attitude problem, sometimes this card can indicate somebody who's partying too much and not taking life seriously enough, or even a drinking problem. But actually, this card could just be about dealing with other people. Perhaps you are sharing your ideas with other people, and they are giving you their 2 cents, which they have every right to do if you're going to share ideas with people. But the problem is that when you're trying to get something off the ground and you tell people that they may say things that are discouraging, and there's no reason for that. It doesn't benefit you to hear that kind of discouraging message. So what you can do is keep your dreams to yourself and let them speak for themselves when they are launched. You don't have to share everything with everybody, even your best friends. And they have their own conditioning based on this lifetime and other lifetimes. And they may be overly cautious. They may think that the particular thing that you're involved with is silly or, impractical. And, you don't need that. You need that like you need a hole in the head. So this goes for any kind of project that you're doing, whether it's a creative project like a novel. Maybe you've never written a novel before, and you really think you have talent, and you think, you know what, I don't have to wait for a publisher to publish my novel. I can do it myself. And you're really pumped up about it, and you tell your friends, and they say, oh, please. Nobody ever gets rich self-publishing, even though that's not the case at all. People have, had amazing success stories doing that. What's coming in, or the advice, is the Hierophant. And this isn't what I was talking about conformity. Deal with that issue of conformity. Are you selling yourself short? Are you trying to fit into somebody else's model of how to live? If you remember the show, since I'm, somebody who went to high school in the 80s, if you remember Family Ties, even if you're younger, you may have seen reruns. You had Michael Fox's character living in a house where the parents were hippies, and he was a conservative who loved Ronald Reagan. That's what an Aquarian is. They are going to go against the grain in whatever environment. If you're raised by a bunch of Baptists, you may become a Wiccan person, and that'll really like blow their minds and freak them out. If you are brought up with a family of pagans, you may become a fundamentalist Christian if you're an Aquarian. That's how it works. That's how you guys work. So the Hierophant card is looking at how you fit into society and how that either helps or hurts your ability to get along with others and to promote what you're doing. If you're trying to have your own business, are you presenting yourself in a way that the majority of people can appreciate, or are you trying to be so different that you end up alienating yourself from others? Because even like with art, I'm somebody, I love creativity, and even like writers, sometimes people are good writers, but they're too into their own heads, and so they don't make their writing universal enough. And so with the Hierophant card, you have to learn how to do that dance between being yourself and playing the game of trying to fit in, even in a superficial way. Also, you may decide that tradition is important right now for whatever it is that you're doing. Maybe you have the desire to learn certain skills within a corporate environment so that you can do it on your own. And so for the time being, you may have to play the game. This card can also talk about Taurus. So it could be a person that's of, I was going to say of a Taurus descent, like it's some kind of ethnicity or something. It could be a Taurus or somebody like with a prominent Taurus in their makeup, or it could relate to timing issues. Maybe the new moon in Taurus, which is on April 26th, where things start to kind of happen for you. It could, the other thing too I want to say is the Hierophant can talk about your philosophical framework. And so with the Hierophant, with that as what's coming in, think about what you do in context with your higher purpose in life. Are you doing something that you feel contributes to humanity? Because you do rule the 11th house, which deals with humanitarian issues and humanity as a whole. And so if you're doing something that's of selfish gain, you may never quite feel a sense of resonance with it. You may always feel that you're doing something that doesn't speak to you, and that may be something you need to look at so that you're on the right track. The outcome is the Page of Cups. I can't help but think that some of you will embrace that inner artist within you before this period of time is over with. And you will, whatever, you can take creativity and apply it to many different areas in someone's life. It doesn't have to be that you're a painter or anything like that. But if you have that creative part of yourself that you feel is missing from what you're doing, you can find some way to kind of sneak it in and feel that you're really sharing your gifts with everyone else, and that you feel fulfilled at the same time. So I'm going to read that passage that I was talking about. And it's so funny because he talks about, or she talks about the Wheel of Fortune. And I wonder if this is something that Abraham Hicks took notice of, where they have a thing. Yeah, I think there's a term, because I'm not familiar with everything that they do, but they had something about a wheel, a focus wheel maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think this is where they're getting that from. I actually turned the page because I didn't want to read the story. I just want to cut to the chase. Talking about this person, they go, on a large piece of poster board, he drew a round circle that encompassed most of the space. In the center of this circle, he placed a picture of some religious idea or scene that denotes a higher power. This could be a picture of the Bible, a picture of Christ, the Lord's Prayer, or whatever religious symbol means most to you. Under this center circle, he typed the following words: Divine intelligence is in charge of my life. I am now open, receptive, and obedient to its rich instruction and guidance. This formed the innermost part of his wheel of fortune. The idea was its hub. From this innermost part, he drew 4 lines to the circumference of the circle. After dividing his wheel into 4 parts, he then labeled the 4 parts: business, family, spiritual, social, and recreational. In each of these 4 parts, he then placed pictures of the results he desired to achieve in those 4 phases of his life. Okay, I'm going to just stop there because I think that's good enough. But that might be like a focus wheel in order to kind of get your visualizations much more honed down. You can also make a vision board. And I don't know, now today's the equinox when I'm recording this, so obviously all of you are not going to be listening today. You may even be listening in April or May. But actually, if you're listening before the new moon in Aries on March 27th, a week to this day, 1 week from now, in other words, you can find images, collect them onto a poster board, and display it as a vision board of the things that you wish to attract into your life. A lot of people have heard of vision boards. Now, I have never made a vision board. I'm debating whether or not to make an electronic vision board. In other words, make some kind of a collage and get the pictures online, because I can't imagine being able to find the appropriate pictures from used magazines. I don't even know if I could find used magazines. I don't have any subscriptions to magazines. So it might just be more convenient for me to do it electronically and then put it as my wallpaper. So every time I log onto my computer, I see that vision board. So you may want to do something like I'm doing. But anyway, just a little hint from Heloise, and I hope that you enjoyed this, Aquarius. If you'd like a private reading on career, life path, or love and career, please click on the link below. Otherwise, have a great next 3 months, prosperous time. Thank you. Bye.